Once upon a time, in the small town of Millfield, there was an old abandoned mansion on the outskirts of town. The mansion had been empty for decades, and the townspeople whispered of strange noises and apparitions that could be seen in its windows at night. No one dared to venture near it after dark, for fear of the ghostly presence that haunted it. One summer evening, a group of teenagers dared each other to explore the mansion. They had heard the stories, but they were determined to prove that there was nothing to be afraid of. They met up outside the mansion just after sunset, their hearts pounding with excitement and fear. As they approached the mansion, the air grew colder, and a thick fog descended around them. The mansion loomed before them, its windows dark and foreboding. They could hear strange noises coming from within, and their nerves were on edge. One of the teenagers, a brave young man named Jack, took the lead. He pushed open the creaky old door, and they stepped inside. The mansion was dusty and decrepit, with cobwebs hanging from the ceiling and peeling wallpaper on the walls. The air was stale and musty, and the only sound was their own breathing. As they explored the mansion, they heard strange noises coming from the upper floors. The sound of footsteps echoed through the halls, and they could hear doors opening and closing on their own. They tried to ignore it, but their nerves were on edge. Suddenly, they heard a blood-curdling scream coming from the third floor. They raced up the stairs, their hearts pounding in their chests. As they reached the top of the stairs, they saw a figure standing in the hallway. It was a woman, dressed in a long white dress, with long flowing hair that covered her face. The woman started to move towards them, her hair swirling around her like a tornado. The teenagers tried to run, but the figure was too fast. She caught them one by one, and they disappeared into thin air. Days went by, and the townspeople grew concerned about the missing teenagers. A search party was organized, and they combed the area around the mansion. They found no trace of the teenagers, and it seemed as if they had vanished into thin air. One night, a young woman named Sarah was walking home from work when she saw a figure standing in the road. It was the same woman she had seen in the mansion, dressed in a long white dress, with long flowing hair that covered her face. The woman beckoned to Sarah, and she followed her into the woods. As they walked deeper into the woods, Sarah felt a sense of dread wash over her. She tried to turn back, but the woman's grip on her arm was too strong. They reached a clearing in the woods, and Sarah saw a group of figures surrounding a large stone altar. The figures were chanting in a language she didn't understand, and their eyes glowed with an otherworldly light. The woman led Sarah to the altar, and she was strapped down to it. The figures continued to chant, and Sarah felt a strange energy flowing through her body. She could hear the sound of drums and pipes, and she felt as if she were being transported to another realm. Suddenly, the chanting stopped, and the figures stepped back. Sarah felt as if she had been released from a trance. She sat up and looked around, disoriented. The figures had disappeared, and she was alone in the clearing. She stood up and tried to run, but her legs wouldn't move. She felt as if she were anchored to the ground. Panic set in as she realized that she was trapped and that there was no escape. The wind picked up, and Sarah heard a strange whispering in her ear. She turned around, but there was no one there. Suddenly, she saw the woman in the white dress, standing before her. The woman's hair was still covering her face, but Sarah could feel her eyes boring into her soul.
"Welcome to the realm of the dead," the woman said, her voice cold and emotionless.
Sarah tried to scream, but no sound came out. She was trapped in the nightmare, and there was no escape. As the night wore on, Sarah felt herself slipping further and further away from reality. The woman in the white dress continued to taunt her, whispering dark secrets and telling her stories of the horrors that lurked in the shadows. Finally, Sarah's mind gave way, and she slipped into a deep, dark sleep. When she woke up, she was back in her own bed, safe and sound. But the memory of that night stayed with her, haunting her dreams and driving her to the brink of madness. From that day on, Sarah knew that she could never escape the horrors of that cursed mansion. The woman in the white dress had claimed her soul, and there was no going back. The people of Millfield continued to avoid the mansion, and the legend of the woman in the white dress became even more terrifying. No one dared to speak her name, for fear that she might hear them and come for them in the night. As for Sarah, she remained trapped in her own personal nightmare, haunted by the memory of that dark and terrifying night. She knew that she could never escape the woman in the white dress, and that her soul would forever be trapped in the realm of the dead.